This is a feature called The Beautiful Game. We're going to get to know a bit more about your footballing background. First and foremost, which football team do you support?
I've always supported Chelsea growing up in England, and my Portugal team's Benfica.
And how come it is that you support those two teams?
Chelsea, when I was growing up, had a lot of Italian players like Gianfranco Zola, Di Matteo, Vialli, and my dad kind of liked the flair of that game, and he always used to get me watching Chelsea, and my granddad liked that team as well, so I kind of went towards them.
And can you remember the first football match that you attended, and who did you go to the game with?
Yeah, I remember the first one that was kind of significant in my life would have been, I was only 9, or I was young, I was under 10, and I went to watch Portugal-England at the old Wembley. So England-Portugal at the old Wembley, and I can't even remember the score now, but I remember the experience of looking on the pitch and how big it was, and the atmosphere was nice.
And who did you go to that game with?
My dad. I went with my dad, yeah.
Is there a particular football kit that brings fond memories, or one that stands out that you perhaps liked a bit more than the others as a kid? Or
yeah, Real Madrid kit. When I got the Real Madrid kit, that was special because it was like the Galactico era, and yeah, it was always a nice white kit.
And which team stood out when you were a kid? Who were the best team around?
Again, Real Madrid, the Galacticos, Luis Figo, Ronaldo, the Brazilian Ronaldo. Beckham obviously went there, and Zidane, Roberto Carlos, just world-class players.
And you mentioned a few names there, but who were the best players in the world when you were a kid? Can you remember ever looking up to maybe one or two particular players?
Yeah, the Brazilian Ronaldo at the time was just phenomenal. Ronaldinho at Barcelona, but my favourite was Luis Figo.
And how old were you when you started to play football?
Well, I played all the time as a kid, but I never took it serious or anything. I just enjoyed playing it throughout school and stuff, and then probably 9 years old was always playing it in school, but then only really started playing for a local team when I was like 12.
And at what age did you realise that you had a chance of maybe playing football as a career?
Most probably 13, when scouts started scouting me a lot, different clubs. My first club that I got scouted for was Wimbledon. It's now MK Dons, but when they were Wimbledon. But then there was a few other clubs all come similar sort of time, and that's when I kind of realised I could potentially be a footballer.
And what was the name of the first team that you played for?
Well, as I said, there was quite a few all came at once: Wimbledon, Arsenal, and Chelsea. And I went to Arsenal first on trial, and then halfway through the trial, they wanted to sign me, but then Chelsea said they would sign me without a trial, and then obviously I was a Chelsea fan, so I picked Chelsea.
And prior to that, was your local team in London that you played for?
Yeah, I played for Finchley Youth, just my local team in Finchley. We lived in East Finchley at the time, and yeah, I used to play striker. I was always a striker, just used to score loads of goals.
And who was your first manager, sort of stroke coach that you came across in football?
In football, probably the most significant early on as a kid, under 16, was Neil Bath, who's now academy director at Chelsea. He's still there. And then obviously in the youth team it was Brendan Rodgers, who's now Celtic manager.
And who has had the biggest influence on your footballing career?
Gosh, there's so many people to name. There's a lot of people who have helped me, but I always think the people who are with you every day, like when you go home, have the biggest influence. And my wife, most recently, has probably had the most influence in my career, keeping me in and settling me down.
And can you remember the first captain that you played under? What was he like?
Obviously I've had a few captains, a few clubs, but it'd be stupid not to say John Terry is probably the most significant, because he had such power at the club, and always looked after the young boys. So he's one that I remember because he did quite a lot for me as a young player there. So probably John Terry.
And finally, throughout your whole career, is there one particular game that stands out as the best game that you've ever played?
Well, I have to be the Chelsea game, wouldn't it? At Bradford. Yeah, so that was, I think all the fans know about that game. It was special, and obviously it will probably stay in history for a long, long time. I can't see that getting beat or being a bigger shock in the FA Cup. So definitely Chelsea away.